Kate Nichol, Sinead McLaughlin, and Padraig DeLargate. Anyone have any declarations of interest they want to declare at this stage? Yep, okay, Chairperson's business. I just want to highlight to the committee that the Minister has managed to get agreement with FE lecturers in relation to pay, so if the committee is content, we'll write to the Minister to thank her for her work on that. It's important to get that resolved. Item 4, draft minutes. Members are at page 7 of our pack. Are members content that they are a true and accurate reflection of our meeting? Yep. Agreed. Okay, matters arising. Anything members wish to raise at this stage? No, we'll move straight to...
Sorry, Chair, just on matters arising. Yes, if members care to turn to page 20, following our joint concurrent meeting, it wasn't hugely satisfactory in terms of how briefings go, so just when members had gone to the trouble of being there, and we've maintained the quorum throughout, which was obviously members in joint concurrent meeting terms, that's pretty much unheard of. So you'd made the effort. It's debatable whether officials did. They could have told the committee in advance that there wasn't that much progress, or the progress was in, and they just didn't. So I was going to write to them in those terms if you're content and the Education Committee is content.
Great.
That's great. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks, Chair.
Perfect. Okay. Can I, on behalf of the committee, firstly thank Studio Ulster for hosting us here today, and welcome Professor Declan Keeney, Professor Frank Lyons, and Angela Reavey to the committee. Thank you very much indeed, Declan, for hosting the committee in North Belfast, and it's great to be back. And I'll hand over to you, sir, if you are content.
Okay, well, look, thank you so much for the invitation to come along and speak this morning, and you're very welcome to Studio Ulster. So, as the Chair said, I'm Professor Declan Keeney. I am the Chief Executive of Studio Ulster, but also I'm a Professor of Screen Technologies and Chair of Screen Technologies and Innovation at Ulster University, and then Director of the CoStar Screen Lab, which will all become relevant as we get into the presentation. And then with me this morning, my colleagues Angela Reavey, who is a board member at Studio Ulster, and then Professor Frank Lyons, who is the Dean of Research and Impact at the University, but also in this context, very much senior responsible owner of the Belfast Region City Deal part of the project. So we're very grateful to the committee for inviting us along, and indeed very grateful to the committee for their support all the way along and through this process. I think we find ourselves here today in many ways because of the support of committees like your own in particular. Looking at the way that this has been funded and looking at how this has been made possible. So we're grateful for this opportunity to talk to where we are. We're very much on the move. We are operationally ready, and we'll discuss this as we get through this morning. Studio Ulster, just for context then, just to give a little bit of context, is a Belfast Region City Deal, a pillar innovation project. The Belfast Region City Deal developed with Ulster University in collaboration with Belfast Harbour, and then supported by Northern Ireland Screen, and then clearly, obviously, the Department for the Economy. It's a unique, globally unique building, it has to be said. The combination of technologies in this building don't exist anywhere else in the world currently. It's a 75,000 square foot building, so it's a very, very big complex. It sits into Belfast Harbour Studios, which again has seen additional investment of about 40 million to create new studios next door, quite literally within arm's reach. We focus on very specialist services, so we work into the film industry, and as we take you around later on this morning for a tour of the facilities, you will see some of that technology demonstrated and the level of sophistication and the innovation that's apparent in this building. Our emphasis is really in-camera visual effects, real-time visual effects, and then looking at what that means for film, animation, games, television, broadcast, and levelling up this place in the context of the skills, the workforce, and then the studio offering in Northern Ireland. The creative industries are a very big contributor to the economy, and we appreciate that this committee acknowledges that and absolutely is an exponent of developing that narrative and the wider auspices of government and economy. So there is the UK, in the UK, in terms of the GVA side of things, we see that the creative industries contributed more to the national economy than aerospace, life sciences and automotive sectors combined. That's very significant when you think of the press coverage that those sectors get themselves. When you combine all three of those sectors, it still doesn't meet in terms of the impact that we have on the economy in this sector. And so for us, it means about 37,000 people working in Northern Ireland in this sector, roughly pushing in about 1.27 billion GVA into the economy locally. That is very, very significant. But what we see, I suppose, is that we are sitting. That's roughly about 5.37 of the total GVA. If you look at that as a global figure, so 123 billion into the UK economy. In Northern Ireland, that's 4%, though. So we sit below the national average, if you like. And so I think that says to us that there is opportunity here for growth for us to be in alignment with the rest of the UK in the context of their growth being around 5.37%, and here in Northern Ireland we're slightly below 4%. Not the lowest region by any stretch, but certainly the opportunity to grow. We have been working on building an environment here, an operational environment that stretches right back, and my colleague Professor Frank Lyons will talk about some of that in the context of our journey here. But building a sustainable model for regional growth, looking at the creative economy and then using the creative technologies in the screen sector as a conduit to do that. That's particularly where we come in today. And then the sectors, I suppose, that we are talking about today are film, broadcast, television, games, animation, VFX, virtual production, and then immersive entertainment. So it's quite a broad spectrum of areas, but very definitely we sit into the lane for all of those. And this building, it would be very easy to imagine it's only really about film and television. It isn't. It is very much about a broader game sector, broader animation sector, and we provide tools and services into all of those sectors as well. The origins of Studio Ulster, we are building on a very solid foundation of research, development and investment, and then indeed investment by DFE and others. Future Screens is a programme that was launched in 2018, roughly £13 million investment, one of the most successful creative clusters in the UK, funded by AHRC, or British Government, being the UKRI umbrella for funding there. And then, seminally, I think that the £600,000 that we received from the Department for the Economy to enable us to build an in-camera visual effects stage, so one of the primary technologies that's now available here at some scale. In Ulster University in 2021, it was a very critical moment for the development not only of this project but of the workforce. That has enabled us then also to build around a very significant skills pipeline, not in just to simply training the existing workforce, and there are 1,200 AAA crew in Northern Ireland, of which we have now trained over 300 in virtual production techniques and technologies. But also that we have embedded that into what's called the Ulster Screen Academy, and we will talk to some of the sort of metrics and the growth there that we're seeing from the university's perspective. We are also world leading the REF exercise, the Research Excellence Framework exercise in 2014 and 2021 in the creative industries. Ulster University in particular would be seen as one of the leading exponents of research in this space across the whole of the UK. And we'll talk a little bit more about the technologies. This is some of the technology you will see later on. So this image shows what's called an in-camera visual effects stage. If you can imagine something about the size of a large two-storey house that's made from seamless TVs and LED screens together. So we now can create the McGuigan Desert in Belfast Harbour and shoot in Magic Hour for the next 12 weeks. The opportunities, when you think about that, are virtually limited only by imagination now. We can create environments on this island, in this part of Europe, that are impossible and maybe unimagined before, or indeed, as has been the case with some of the local productions that we've been involved with to date, we are able to create and keep productions here in Northern Ireland for them to spend here rather than moving off-site to go to foreign locations. And there are lots of really big benefits to that around sustainability and so on. So we will see technologies such as motion capture stages, 3D scanning, some of the screening spaces and the auxiliary spaces that support this level. We work into every level. Make no mistake that this building is not simply about AAA streamers and large-scale broadcasters. It can do that, and we will and are doing that. But this is also about local productions and growth, and this is also embedded in the middle of it. We have a research innovation centre, a world-leading research innovation centre called CoStar, which we will talk about as we progress. So the Studio Ulster project itself, Studio Ulster Limited, for which I am the chief executive, is a wholly owned subsidiary of Ulster University, for clarity. It's a flagship project, I guess, under the Belfast Region City Deal, probably the most advanced project. I think we're now operationally ready. It attracted £25.2 million worth of funding. and then obviously working in partnership, as I've already outlined. So we are world leading in camera visual effects virtual production facility, and we say this without any reservation currently. World-class production as well from the point of view of the research, development, innovation that's been applied. This is now a maturing of this technology. We've helped deliver and design that maturity. The innovation that we've been working through at Ulster University for the last 4 years has really enabled us to step into an industry solution as well that is actually best in class. And this is a carbon-reducing and sustainable business. It's really critical that people understand that this is a tool, this is a facility that is driving down the carbon footprint of the screen industries worldwide, the adoption of this technology. So the key why, if you like, our key objectives have never changed. We think we've got this right at the very outset, even before we launched our first business case applications and so on. That Tier 1 Centre of Excellence, so we want to be research, development, innovation, or virtual production, and then obviously a commercial centre, a world-class commercial centre, both nationally, regionally first, let's start there, nationally, and then internationally. And then our core services, we range across 5 very sophisticated, very technical studios, of course, that are in large camera, in-camera visual effects technologies. Apologies for all the terminology, but we will see this firsthand later on. It's much easier to see this sometimes. Motion capture technology. This is the stuff where we can capture gait, movement, performance of actors, to get the data for all of that, to be able to recreate it. 3D scanning and 4D volumetric scanning, so full body scanning. And then research development. We have a CoStar lab, or the CoStar Screen Lab here, part of the largest research creative technologies research network in Europe. And then auxiliary accommodation. So from the point of view of our objectives then, we want to establish Northern Ireland as a global hub for virtual production. And we believe we're already well on the way to doing that. We have, when we look at the consistency or the construction of the people we've hired, it's a mixture of local, international, and expertise that we're bringing to this country now that doesn't exist currently in this country. Although I would argue we're building quietly in the background with big pipelines and working with colleagues and FE colleagues as well to build out what is a really big opportunity for us as an island to own this space in some respects. Securing international partnerships, we lead in the research and development in this side of things. That's endorsed by the British government in the fact that we've been funded, which unlocks roughly about a £12 million investment in the research development alone in the CoStar Screen Lab. We have consistently, and we've been developing, we realised at the outset of this project we need to build a workforce that can make these projects sustainable. We are absolutely determined to bring a broad spectrum of people into this space. These are good jobs, they're well paid in some respects, but they're also unlocking loads of other opportunities. Everything from apprenticeships right through to skilled and craft and labour. What we're seeing now is the creative industries in some respects are replacing quite a lot of the heavy industries in the harbour, and that's very important that we bring colleagues and communities with us in North Belfast and other parts of Northern Ireland, and we will talk about that regionality as we get into that. Make no mistake, this project is based here in Belfast Harbour, but this is this runs right across the whole region in the context of the development and the investment that we've made both as a university and as a company to make that happen. So the USPs then from our perspective are very much in the commercial side, I suppose. We have a fully integrated virtual production ecosystem that makes us globally unique. There is nowhere else in the world currently it has this combination of technologies under one roof as we would see it here, and certainly not at the level of sophistication and the innovation that's applied there. And then we have the most advanced deployment of LED. So we have what's called a dynamic volume system here. So our nearest market competitor would take 3 to 5 weeks, if not longer, to reconfigure one of these stages into a new stage or new style or a new dimension or a new permutation, if you like. We can do that between half a day and 1 day here in Northern Ireland using LiDAR technologies, robotics, lifting devices, all sorts of new technologies that are proprietary to this space. And so we lead the market in the context of the market offering that we have. We also have the tallest motion capture stage in Europe. We are a fully SMPTE 2110, so this is really critical for future-proofing this building. It removes video cables. We don't have lots of video cables. Remarkably, in a space like this, it's all fibre. And so fibre over what we call IP. So we have 90 fibres that run through the fabric and the spine of this building, critically future-proofing us and enabling us to work with broadcasters right through. And then one of the most advanced 3D and 4D volumetric scanners currently available anywhere in the world. I think it's important also to mention we are operational. I think this is really critical to understand this, and this was underwritten by, and we're thankful to the auditors for the Gate 4 process, which obviously was commissioned by the Department for the Economy. We've been greenlit the whole way through our Gate processes. We're delighted to say that the operational readiness review completed in March has also a very extensive review, it has to be said. They interviewed more than 15 or 16 people from memory. Had a very deep dive into the company, into the university, into the whole project in relation to the investment, and very satisfied to say that we are greenlit. I'm going to hand over to Professor Lyons.
Thanks, Declan. Yeah, and I think Declan's already alluded to the fact it's important to realise that Studio Ulster just hasn't appeared over the past few years. I mean, Ulster University have driven over 20 plus years a whole mission around the creative industries and the creative sector in the region, which really came to life in 2018 through that Future Screens programme. Before that, there was no creative industries ecosystem in the region. There were lots of really high-performing companies, but they were all pointing in different directions. It was very disparate. So at Ulster University, we went on that mission to bring the ecosystem together, and that has provided the platform to allow us to take advantage of the Belfast region City Deal and Studio Ulster and so on is the latest development in that. So the university has provided that leadership, and also through the at times painful process around the Belfast region City Deal, rightly so, incredible expectations around assurance and financial sustainability and stuff going forward. So, the university had led through that. And again, I can't praise our Vice-Chancellor, Paul Bartholomew, enough, because he's provided that leadership, incredibly committed to the wider creative industries mission that the university is on, but also critically the Studio Ulster project itself. And the Ulster Screen Academy that Declan's alluded to, that's a piece that really came into being under Declan's leadership maybe 4 years ago. And we'll talk in a bit more detail about that shortly. Next slide, Declan. And of course, there's a very large responsibility around the tracking of benefits that comes out of the Belfast Region City Deal project and the Studio Ulster facility. And so we've been working over the past couple of years and very intensively over the past few months in terms of developing this benefits tracking tool that we now have, that Belfast Region City Deal and colleagues in Department for the Economy are now buying into, so that we have this aligned benefits tracking framework, so that we're not all doing different things, working through different processes. And just very, very quickly running through some of the actual benefits that we're tracking. Clearly around employment and economic growth, direct jobs, and we can provide updates already in some of these. We're looking at a large number of staff already recruited to Studio Ulster Limited, direct jobs. Indirect jobs, we've already had a number of productions through here, so local crew working on that. Very, very large numbers already, 120 people on the Titanic piece, and Blue Lights and so on that have been in here already. Then there's sort of longer-term KPIs around direct GVA growth, indirect GVA growth, and productivity that comes out of those things. Things like FDI, the number of international companies that we attract to this facility, to the region, and we're already seeing massive interest from international companies. Then another key area of the benefits is around innovation, research and development. Declan has already mentioned we're part of what you might refer to as an exclusive club, one of only 3 network labs across the UK that were awarded as part of the CoStar initiative. It's the largest UKRI investment in infrastructure in its history, is the CoStar network. We've already been incredibly successful in pulling down UKRI grants from HRC, PSRC, DECIT and so on. And again, there's reference to a number of really innovative projects that we've already worked on and produced outcomes from, current and future applications of 5G in the creative sector, for instance. We're actually hosting a number of competitive funding calls. That's what brings local industry into the picture as well. There's a larger £5 million over the next 4 to 5 years as part of CoStar that's going to be awarded to innovative companies that come forward with new ideas around how we develop these technologies that we're talking about. And as I say, CoStar, you'll see that today, it's really embedded at the heart of the Studio Ulster facility. We've got this R&D lab, but it sits in that wider facility that's driven by commercial production. Then a critical part, and of clear interest to this committee, is the skills training and talent pipeline. So again, at Ulster, we have led that set of initiatives around making sure that we bring industry's latest thinking into our taught and research programs. That's at undergraduate level and postgraduate level. So we've got new virtual production focused programs in games design. We've got a new MA in film and TV that just launched, and these are across the region. Some of those courses are delivered in the Belfast campus, some in the London Derry campus, and for instance, digital media production is delivered on the Coleraine campus. So again, it's that region-wide effort in terms of providing these course opportunities to bring as many young people to the Studio Ulster party, as we call it, to really sort of mobilise that talent pipeline that's absolutely in demand, not just in our region, across the UK, Europe, and internationally. So we've got those university programmes. We also run, Declan's just alluded to, fairly intensive programmes of upskilling for local industry. And we do that in partnership with NI Screen. One key area at the very highest level that we've already fed into the project, we've got a number of PhD level projects in play, and that's what really unlocks the very highest end of the technological future of what we're trying to do here. So again, we work very collaboratively with local, national and international companies on PhD projects. And this last point, this all-island collaboration we are providing, we're working with on an all-island basis in terms of making sure that we're really upskilling industry professionals across the island, because that provides that mobility. The biggest issue at the minute, the biggest impediment, is the lack of available high-end skills, and that's really the effort that we're involved in. We've also got that social facing piece that we do. So one programme that's been incredibly successful is the SURF programme, Skills for Urban and Rural Futures. That's led by a colleague of ours, Professor Paul Moore, part of the CoStar programme as well. And that really looks at bringing young people who maybe work in centres in socially disadvantaged areas who might not normally have these educational and training opportunities. So what we do is we put computer infrastructure into their centres. We provide trainers from the Ulster Screen Academy in to train those young people up, and then some of those young people become trainers themselves. So it's that idea, process of training the trainers. And we alluded to a couple of the actual locations that we've been working in, incredibly successful, and that's an ongoing. And again, very thankful on an ongoing basis to DFE for investment, not just in terms of the initial virtual production stage that we were able to put into our Belfast campus, which really gave us that lead, but also ongoing investment. So there's just been a £500,000 investment in what we call the Presence Lab on our London Derry campus, which is looking at immersive technologies and motion capture and so on. Everything's interlinked. Nothing's sort of set apart, even though they might be in different areas of our region. And I've already alluded to some of those other initiatives. The Ulster Screen Academy, as I say, that's an umbrella initiative that brings together all of our screen and creative technologies related programs. So, these are in areas of film, broadcast, animation, games, so on and so forth. But it even brings in to areas like music technology, because one area that we're looking at now in terms of virtual production is the whole sort of immersive and spatial audio piece. So the Ulster Screen Academy went from having around 190, 200 students maybe 3-4 years ago on all these programs, and we're now touching 1,000 students. We're oversubscribed. All of the programs that we run in Belfast, London Derry and Coleraine are currently oversubscribed, and that's why we keep ramping up our capacity as a university to allow us to take more students onto these programs, but we constantly keep these programs updated so that we know that graduates are industry ready when they graduate from these programs, and that's a key part of what we're doing. EDI, sustainability and social value. I mean, we're working very intensively on trying to pull together this baseline report on just where we are in terms of EDI in the creative sector in this region. There are a number of different pockets of information, like the NI Screen hold a database, for instance, in terms of like gender, disability, figures in terms of who works in the industry. So we're just trying to set a new baseline so that we can work from that and make sure that we're addressing those underrepresented areas. Sustainability is a piece that Declan leads on, so I'll maybe hand you over very quickly to Declan.
Yeah, sure. This is an area that's essentially we've written some of the seminal research. We've been involved in leading on the research, the early understanding of how this technology can help reduce carbon footprint. So, as a policy fellow for DCMS in London, I authored a report that looked at virtual production and its role in the reduction of carbon, and it is very, very extensive. What we know, and we need to get and build better data for, is that we can save between 25 and 60, 70% carbon reduction in terms of the screen. How do we achieve that? There are lots of ways that we achieve that. Not travelling to Morocco to shoot in Magic Hour is one way, but another way is reducing the amount of set bills that we need and being more sophisticated about how we build and the waste that's involved with film, right through to how we manage power and data, and there's quite a sophisticated rendering of this. So we're, through the CoStar network now, we're leading on some of the key research right across the UK. We are essentially a live data generation centre as well, because we are a very good case study when you look at what we do here to try and understand how we can reduce carbon in the industry. And again, it's evidenced, and it's already has empirical evidence against it in many of these reports. This report's available online. There's 67 pages should you decide to want to jump into it. But some of the recommendations now are being carried forward not only by DCMS and by government, but obviously into the CoStar network to look at what's next and where the gaps are in our intelligence and our understanding to build further and further savings in terms of a lot of the companies. I think one of the critical points I would make here to finish the point on the carbon for now, at least, and happy to take questions, but is that if we as Northern Ireland PLC and if we as an industry here cannot articulate our position in this, the idea of attracting foreign direct investment is something we will not get to play. Even local commissioning companies and right across the BBC, but into public statements by Netflix and Sony and Disney and major companies like that do come here and do make content. They are all pushing targets to have net zero production by 2030, 2035 in some cases, or earlier. We need to be able to articulate how we can achieve and help them achieve that, to be able to track that investment. And this is a critical piece of research that I think that's not only a smart business, but it is also very much, in terms of the company, its own approach and ethical approach to how we do this sustainably is a critical piece for us. Frank. Angela. Yeah.
Yes, so not to go through these, but hopefully we have demonstrated in terms of that policy alignment, in terms of the programme for government, DFE, economic plan, etc., Climate Change Act, and that alignment, so on the good jobs, regional balance, improved productivity and reduced carbon emissions. So we hopefully have demonstrated that in the presentation. Just to recap then on 2 points we wanted to make. Just to let you know what our challenges are going forward. I call this is the biggest startup that Northern Ireland's probably had. 70-odd million investment. We are a startup company. We're recruiting people. It's all been going on for the last 6 months. So getting those routes to market, getting the global positioning, that marketing is really critical to what we do. So there's a lot of work and effort going into that at the moment. That sustainability then, in terms of the R&D base. R&D is critical. It's going to be critical to grow the independent companies who are the backbone of the creative tech sector in Northern Ireland as well. So getting access to the funding to allow that to happen is really important. And back to people, because it's always about people. Growing the talent, that talent capability is really important. And again, having the funding to do that. And obviously underpinning all of that is, as a company, is our revenue model. We have substantial costs involved in the running of the Studio Ulster, and we need to make sure we're a financially and environmentally sustainable business going forward. So they're all the really critical elements. And then just to finally look at what our recommendations are to yourselves. starting with the market. Again, I suppose in everything that you do, if you can be supporting Studio Ulster, we have lots to do. We have great relationships and networks under the team here, but just supporting it and helping us when we are engaging with the public broadcasters, streamers, producers, etc. Funding is obviously critical. We've talked about the R&D. We've been very successful, and hopefully success breeds success, but we need to have more Northern Ireland R&D funding, and really that support in getting the UK funding, the UKRI, the DSIT, etc., to give us that global reach. Workforce, again, as I say, helping us to develop, and the funding to develop that Northern Ireland screen workforce planning approach, and very much aligned to what the department is doing already. And that international support, which goes across in terms of issues like taxation, etc. That might be lobbying as much as anything, but helping us to get, to expand the number of incentives and the eligibility for incentives for that R&D-led and that hybrid virtual production projects. Virtual production is a very new industry. It's important that we get access to all the financial support that we can. I'll pass you back to Declan.
Thanks, Angela. So just to pull together then, just some more thoughts to close out this bit of the conversation at least. We see roughly 5 pillars that are critical here to success, and that we've outlined many of them already: education and skills, right across the existing workforce, but right into the pipelines that come through at all levels. We want to see young people, creating apprenticeships and January apprenticeships where they're building aircraft fuselage for Netflix, and we need houses and we need all of those things. That's all critical also, but there's a new path for young people at every level into this industry now, right the way through to C++ programmers and so on. We need those now also in this industry. The infrastructure, we've built a world-class infrastructure here, but a continued investment to enable us to be competitive in the research, development and innovation funds. We have 6 companies coming to us now in the next week for an 8-week residency as part of the funding structures that Professor Lyons had outlined there a minute ago. Regional policy, I know, is something that's very, very close to this committee, and that is something that is a driver for all of us. If we understand the data, we understand where the growth opportunities are, help us to positively push in that direction. And these partnerships as well that we have, we cannot underestimate the value of Northern Ireland Screen in this conversation. They are a critical partner for us at every level, between bringing in clients and pushing the message to globally, right the way through to the training and development. They funded the training of those 300 film crew here locally out of the 1,200 that we have as a base. That is critical. We did the training delivery in partnership with them, but they're absolutely building on the experience that they have uniquely as an organisation over many, many years now, and the learnings about building. When you look at Game of Thrones coming in initially, it was about 30% of the crew were local. By the time they finished, it was closer to 70% of the crew were local. This is a nascent sector right now on this island, and even within the broader UK, we have very few people that understand and can deliver this technology. We are building them, but also help us to do that at every level. And then private investment should be encouraged in this sector as well. There are many, many growth opportunities here for micro SMEs, and we have an SME culture here in Northern Ireland. And ultimately incentivising those folks to get into this world, and for them to come and work with us and to get access to this facility as a world-class facility. Let's make it, not interested in biggest, best. What we're interested in is the busiest. Utility, we want it to be busy. We want it on the commercial side, but on the R&D and development side, that's how we breed success. So thank you very much.
Declan, thank you very much for that really, really great overview, and to your colleagues. I suppose if I could just start in terms of, this is a globally leading centre. So how are you currently advertising that on the world stage? How are we trying to say that this small part of North Belfast has a globally leading centre, and what role is Northern Ireland Screen and the department playing in trying to put you on the world map?
Well, I can start. So we have already built quite a good reputation. We see this in the metrics around the social media and LinkedIn and on all of the social channels. We also have very good presence in some of our major client markets, so North America, West Coast, right the way across into Europe now. Primarily, we're very keen to diversify our clientele as well, so we're pushing globally. We've also just appointed Freuds. Freuds are one of the leading marketing agencies in the UK. They are currently building a launch campaign. You have to remember that our launch now is the 19th of June. We're excited about what will be an incredible experience for those attending on the 19th of June here. And indeed, there are many events that predate that, so we're looking at events for crew and all sorts of events that lead in with key stakeholders as we move towards our launch on the 19th. There is a very significant step change coming in the marketing, communications, branding, new websites, new logos, refresh of the logo, and so on. So we step out in a very healthy place as a startup company, as Angela has outlined, already with very, very significant client interest. We would take maybe 12 to 15 tours minimum a week from international clients here. That hasn't been any different this week. In fact, Disney are in after this, and others, and so we have a churn there that is already built in a really good relationship with the market. But that'll only accelerate now, Chair, just to your point, as we push in. And those brand assets and a lot of that material that's required now, building from scratch. We have a world-class company that's involved in the back end, and our team are world-class and very experienced at doing this as well, it should be said. And that interplay between the team that we've built here at Studio Ulster, and there is a team, and that investment that we're making in getting our message out there globally, I think that's succeeding at the moment. It'll be exciting to see where we get to post-launch.
And do you think it would be useful then that the executive as a whole had a creative industry-wide strategy, that all executive departments were moving in that direction, so that when Deputy First Minister, the Economy Minister are doing those important global trade missions, that at the heart of it is the creative industries here in Northern Ireland?
Do you want to answer
Yeah,
that?
I mean, I think absolutely. Obviously, the Matrix report in the creative sector was 2018, and things have moved so quickly. I don't think that any of us, even in 2018, would have seen the move in technology. Yeah. So everything, again, virtual production, we weren't even talking about virtual production like 5 years ago, so this is all new technology. So I think we all talk about the disadvantage of AI, but if you start to look at just technology, this is definitely a sector that could embrace it. So I mean, absolutely would be very supportive of that.
Could I just come in on that one? And again, some of the initiatives we've spoken about. So Future Screens is currently now funded by Department for Communities.
Yes.
So the communities have a stake in that, the SURF project, for instance. So there does seem to be this cross-departmental approach that I think I think we all agree it could be streamlined to everyone's benefit. And I think, my colleague Paul Moore, who I mentioned previously, has drafted a digital strategy and so on. So it most definitely could benefit from a cross-departmental executive creative industry strategy.
Yeah, and I would just add to that there's a cross-sectoral piece here in this anyway. When you think about the knock-on benefit of some of the scale of the film tourism and so on, and the tourism that comes with Game of Thrones and successes like that, we have a better chance now because of this investment of pulling in more and more shows at that scale and that level. The investment the Harbour have made here in the studios, the investment that we've made into Studio Ulster, this is an incredibly impressive site now. This can cover budgets from $100 million right down to £5 or £6 million. And we've already made, some of the very first productions that we've made here are £5 and £6 million productions, or circa that value around the banding. We wouldn't know for exact figures, but ultimately those types and scales of productions are staying here. They're not leaving. One of the productions, the Titanic production, would have gone probably to something like the Black Sails lot, which is a physical lot to shoot in South Africa. That's a local company, Stellify, brilliant company to work with. They've made an extraordinary piece of work. It's a 4-part documentary series we're all looking forward to. But I think what is exciting about that is that they're working in this new technology. They can get into this and keep it here, and they're telling the story of this place. There will be a bounce from that. That will come out. They'll talk about Titanic. That will push again the tourism here into the centres that we have in town and other parts of Northern Ireland. It builds awareness. That is a small example of a local company stepping into that. You bring in large-scale production, and we are looking at many of those now with the support of Northern Ireland Screen over the next 2 years. That's exciting. We have an opportunity to attract new types of productions. FDI are looking at us differently. We have a new offering. We have greater capability. We have greater capacity than we ever had before. We can now track projects here that we would not have been entertained for in the past. That's the opportunity piece.
And then finally, just for me, given that all politics is local, and Professor Muir's done a great job in terms of supporting the digital creative hub at St Malachy's College, and with the group in Rathkill, UNAVI Arts and Cultural Network, but where you're situated in one of the most deprived wards of Northern Ireland. My office is a stone throw from here, and if I walked out onto the street and said, Studio Ulster is around the corner, they would look at me as if I had 5 heads. How do we ensure that locally and for all communities in this surrounding vicinity that actually they can benefit from the major investment that's taking place here?
Well, I can start with that. So one of the schemes we're working with is and you've been involved in this as well, Newton Abbey Community Network here, so Monkstown, and the tremendous work that they're doing here. So Frank had mentioned that we've invested. They've essentially had that investment manifest as follows: we put in computers with our gaming machines into a youth group. The youth group themselves then can build esports teams. That's a really huge sector in itself. But that's an attractor for young people. They're interested that culturally, creatively, technology, and that attraction brings them in. But those machines can also then be used for training in 3D software, so like Unreal Engine. Unreal Engine is at the heart of what we do here at Studio Ulster at this scale. And so what we're able to do there is bring young people and youth leaders, really train them as certified trainers in some of these softwares. They then start to train their own communities. They're building not only esports teams, they're building now training into those communities. And so what we're seeing, and they're involved, indeed that group is involved in the launch on the 19th, to be very clear, they're building some of the stuff that we're doing for the 19th. I'm not going to give away the event, but make no mistake that they see themselves as having an avenue now, an opportunity to come here. That's not about coming to university. Some of those young people are, we would classify them in the context of education as probably well capable, but least likely to get to university. And we have got to build all our avenues for them and show them that there's other paths to the door for a place like this. And that's exactly what we've set out to do, and we've been doing very successfully. In fact, Prince William visited that programme not that long ago, actually, and really immersed himself in with that group for about nearly 2 hours at the York Street campus here in Belfast. And was, by all accounts, very impressed with those young people speaking up for their own communities and their own position. And so they're seeing themselves in the way that maybe their grandfathers would have gone into the docks. They're coming here to get into a skills set and an apprenticeship in a way that leads them into a career in this creative industries. I think that's really critical, that we build pathways for people and, showing rather than talking about it and being, tokenistic about it. Let's tangibly make a difference, and these schemes are, I think.
And it's the fact that it goes across, as Declan said, all sectors. Talked about tourism, so again, it is across all sectors. But we would see Studio Ulster as lifting, the tide for everybody. And so in the same way that, Belfast Harbour, Northern Ireland Screen has already got so many different talents involved. You can't do a production without the hairdressers, the makeup artists. It's across the board. So it's not always just the digital aspect. It's across the board, and it's showing people there's some really exciting types of work that goes on. I think so. It is really, across all areas of life should be, coming and seeing something for them.
Yeah, and I mean that a very common small production, which is relative to feature film production. That was a local production by Stellify here for BBC. It has to be said. There was 120 people, as Frank touched on earlier on, working on that show. That's not all of us. That is people coming from all parts of Northern Ireland. 90% of them are living and working in Northern Ireland. They're not necessarily Northern Irish.
Yes.
They're living and working here permanently. And that is an incredibly high statistic when you see that level of spend staying in this country because of this technology investment now. But also, that is paying people's mortgages. That's day to day. That's people who are drivers. That's people who are working as joiners, building sets, makeup, costume, grips, lighting, sparks, sound. The list is fairly endless as we move into these things. And that's what we want. Utility. If those people are busy, we all benefit ultimately.
There's that piece about pathways that you've touched on. A lot of the initiatives that we're involved in really just provides a taster for some of the young people that you're referring to, Chair. But what we've done as a university is create these pathways. We've got to make sure that, for those young people who are genuinely interested, we create those pathways into university programs, because there's a lot of demand for really high-end digital skills as well in those pathways. That's why our courses are oversubscribed. Many of the people who are on our Ulster Screen Academy courses come from what we would look at as non-conventional routes through education. So that's the other piece of work we're intensively leading on, is to make sure that those pathways are available for those young people.
And I suppose it should be said as well, Frank, that to enable this project, you need to bring it through something like a trusted broker and a university. It would not have happened without Ulster University's involvement. You couldn't go directly to kind of build what we have as cheek by jowl placement of industry, supporting research and research supporting industry. And this, we've built a sort of a circular economy here around this particular. It's a unique business in that sense, in that we can now look to the future because we have an independently funded, that has integrity, and independently funded research centre here, as you will see later when we get a chance to walk around. But also that we can support commercial industry here, and then we can meet them in the middle where they have skills, demands, and needs. And so, in some respects, it's a really good ecosystem. It's an ecosystem that we've been working on for more than 10 years. This project doesn't just land on us, very quickly. This is going right back to having established even the skills basis and the pipelines through the university back in 2019 with the Screen Academy. And that growth has gone from something like 125, 130 students back 5 years ago to 873 registered only 4 years ago, or 3 years ago. So we have really, really good visibility, but then the university can act as a conduit to that, and also as a broker in the context of public money.
Brilliant, thank you. David?
Thank you. Thank you. It's brilliant to be here, and it's inspiring actually to listen to what has been achieved to date. Just a couple of quick things. The threat from tariffs from Trump, is that a risk, a major risk, or what way do you see that affecting?
Yeah, I mean, I've spoken to a lot of the agencies and a lot of the companies that are in this sector, and we would have our own view on this. When we look at where the industry is, I mean, that narrative, even since that announcement, has changed somewhat. So it isn't much less significant than it seemed at first. And so even trying to tie down exactly how it would manifest, for us, we're carrying on. We still have a very, very significant interest from North American companies that are coming here, that are already, lined up to come here. Where we see, as I also sit on the board of the British Film Institute, they would take a similar view. British Film Commission take a similar view. It is, let's work this through carefully. There's a brilliant relationship in this particular part of the world with the North American market. Inside the UK, it's worth about 4.7 billion per annum to the UK GVA. So there is a very significant piece. So from our perspective, we are kind of watching brief. Let's see how it manifests and develops. There's a lot of that wouldn't affect what we do. I mean, scanning and a lot working into motion capture and a lot of the other industries that we, in terms of the diversity of clients that we would have here, would be unaffected anyway. I think it's also probably a very good reminder for every company in this part of the world to diversify your client base and also look west and look east, I should say. Not necessarily always west, but we enjoy working with our colleagues in North America. We have brilliant relationships with many, many companies in North America. We look forward to keeping working culturally with those companies. We don't see any evidence that's been affected right now. If anything, yes, the environment, the operational environment, obviously needs a lot of working through and needs calm heads just to take us through with a bit of leadership. But I think every organisation, major organisation, and certainly us as a company, we're calm right now, but it's a watching brief.
Yeah.
I think it's also the fact that, every region across, everywhere is obviously concerned about it, but we have something very unique. Mm-hmm. So, if North American companies are going to be more selective about when they come, outside of the country, we are offering something very unique. So if they're looking at Scotland previously, looking at Ireland, none of those have this virtual production centre. So it has to hopefully put us in a stronger position if they're being selected. I don't think anyone's thinking it will turn up in any shape or form, but that helps, definitely.
Second to that, then we've seen a drop in funding provided from the department to the universities for research mainly around research. Is that affect anything, or your progress moving forward, or the growth that you're planning? Is that a risk there?
Do you want to go?
Not at this point in time. I mean, we've had developed that capacity. We do have that sort of R&D machine already tried and trusted across the university. I'm thinking in the medium term it could be problematic if we're not funding the required number of PhD projects, for instance. Some of what we're talking here is genuinely right at the cutting edge, and that's what has given this brand advantage, this first mover advantage, is that technical expertise. That can really that capacity really needs to be developed at a very, very high level. So something like, PhD funding for taught masters programs, that higher level, allows the university to continue on at the level it is currently involved in. So currently not an issue, but I think going forward it could be a substantial issue. Yeah.
If I could add into that, just I think it's really important that we remember that the Belfast Region City Deal money is capital investment, and I think what's really critical now too, from the point of view of enabling local companies and SMEs and micro companies to come in. We were already doing this through CoStar and others. We have 6 local companies joining us, as I've said, for 8 weeks. But that was funded centrally from the UK government. Let's find conduits that enable our companies funded locally, to come into this, and let's incentivise that activity, that productivity, that opportunity for research, development, innovation and growth and capacity building as well in our local industry. We've got really good levels of capital investment. We've used it wisely. We've built a sustainable centre. But also I think to enable SMEs and micros to really flourish here, it would be great to see more an additional investment in that sense. Yeah.
But if that research budget is reducing, if that's what you're saying next year, and the short term sort of that's not an issue, are you then saying the following year, or all I'm thinking, you put such a capital investment in here, you're leading the way here and creating something that would be it seems ridiculous that we don't actually bring more to it and scale rather than.
That's a really good point. And Declan has talked about diversification of income streams. It's exactly the same in that research and development space. We know that opportunities for EU funding, Horizon, for instance, have more recently opened up again. So we're working in partnership with a number of colleagues at other institutions, really starting to focus on the potential to pull down research and development funding there. We're part of this CoStar network again, which the UK government have very, very clearly stated through investment where they think the potential and the opportunities lie. And CoStar is one area again that we're convinced that we can pull down more of our fair share of research and development funding. But again, if you kind of pull the foundation away from that, it is more difficult.
Pulling money out of those sources will have to manifest somewhere. And I think when we look at where we are, the growth in terms of GVA it runs at about 1.5 times the other sectors. That is the creative industries in the UK wider economy. It's 5.7% of the whole GVA for the UK wide. We sit at below 4% here. Why are we not at 5% or above? And so, if there's an answer to your question, the answer will be, well, where will we be with that? What that figure looked like 26, 27, 28. How do we increase that? Well, we're saying here are ways that you can increase that. Incentivize centres like us to be able to push harder and build productivity and build opportunity for companies here locally. And if we can do that, that needs investment and needs support.
And it's that realisation that we can't just continue to do everything. We can't continue to fund everything. But, if we've got a statement like, for instance, one of the sector priorities is the screen industries, then we've, as Declan said, we've got to make sure that the requisite investment is made in those selected priority areas like screen industries.
And it's back to the SME community. It's a community that always need funding. And they tend not to sit, some of them sit within Invest NI. So we have a sector that some of them will look to Northern Ireland Screen, some will sit to Invest NI. But they generally, they will need funding. We've got more access to finance, obviously, has come on board, but they're not a typical equity investment again. So, they'll tend to be more debt, but they don't have assets. So you can see the funding is definitely a sort of a challenge for the companies. And yet all the companies we've talked about from a Northern Ireland point of view, they are all absolutely SMEs who are doing terrific jobs, probably giving an impression of much larger than they are. But they all need, underlying funding to grow.
Can I ask one more? Is that right? Yeah, just to pick up, you talked about and just carry on with that, because you talked about a workforce and even a strategic plan, kind of for the industry, if you like, not just for Studio Ulster. Where does that need to come from? Who needs to? Is that the department needs to come with a strategic plan for the whole, or are you saying the university does that, or where does that need to come?
It's a partnership approach, really.
Who needs to lead it?
I suspect that because of our experience, the university with Studio Ulster Limited, for instance, are best placed with the NI Screen. the people who are actually at the core, at the heart of the industry. But it needs buy-in from everybody. What we have demonstrated with Studio Ulster is a spectacular success of collaboration. It's the government, industry, academic collaboration.
Well, it is. We had a very high-level Chinese delegation here yesterday, and they were extraordinarily impressed by that interplay between how we positioned ourselves between government, private, public, and then obviously looking at how we broker our position where you can have independent research that is supporting the wider industry, not just Studio Ulster. It's not about us. It's about Northern Ireland PLC. So there's a broader remit, truly kind of that connects into the ethos of the Belfast Region City Deal investment when you look at the motivations behind why we would invest in these sectors. And so in some respects it is about lifting up this place, and so it's a multi-sectoral approach, but we have people that have a lot of expertise, Northern Ireland Screen and others, and we need to listen to industry. I think that the one thing that Ulster University has done unapologetically is work with industry, and we've redefined how we work with industry here. I think even the HRC and others would acknowledge that we've redefined how universities can work with the sector and private sector, and how we can support them to develop and listen and actually hear what it is that they need, that where the gaps are, where the spaces are, where the skills gaps, the capacity gaps are, and indeed the investment that Angela's referenced there. Where are they? Where is that needed? Because they are probably the folks that know best. But at the same time, if you've always done what you always do what you've always done, you're just going to get the same results. And that's where Ulster University and the university has changed things. Things like Future Screens NI has been incredibly successful. We've worked with about 114 companies, I believe, in the time that funding has been in, and it's now migrated into Department for Communities also. But that is built an awareness of the sector here. It now sees itself. We understand exactly what it looks like. We have the data through a policy and evidence centre. That's where universities come in and can help build good data, good understanding of the sector, really understanding the needs, and then identifying that to help committees like your own drive policy and policy change to make and incentivise investment.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan.
Thanks, Chair. Firstly, apologies for being late. Hugely impressed with the vision and the facilities, albeit we get to see more of them shortly. It's amazing to see just what's on our, on the edge of North Belfast. I'm sure you should be very proud of this facility, and even coming in, you could really get that sense of industry coming together in all its different theatres. So, well done. Could I ask, internationally and domestically, who's your key competitors?
That's a really great question, because we struggle with this question ourselves a little bit. We know where every virtual production stage is in the world. This is not something that's hard to find. It's not like we're sitting here trying to piece that together. But what we know from all of the international clients that we're currently working with is that we have a facility here that is globally unique. So we don't have a direct comparator in the context of a facility that can provide the level of services in this space, or indeed the sophistication of the actual stages themselves. There isn't anywhere in the world that offers the level of sophistication in terms of the technology provision that's here. So it's very hard to compete. But when we look at where major stages are and where some of these builds are, there are pockets of them at the scale. Remember, we work also in different scales. So the answer to the question might be at large scale we would compete with places like Leaveston and Shinfield and Pinewood and other studios like that. But they very often don't have permanent rigs like this. They don't have a company like ours that is essentially a permanent fixture. They would bring in pop-ups. That's really problematic. Pop-ups are huge, like the carbon deficit of trying to build those things each time you need them, for example. But you're also pulling off a shelf 2-year-old technology. What we have is the very best version of this technology anywhere in the world, only applied here. Things we can do here in terms of production, you cannot do it at any other facility in the world currently. This is what is attracting on many of the North American companies that we are dealing with right now. They understand that. They're looking at this and redefining how they've worked previously to absolutely exploit the opportunity. And so we're very acutely aware of the market rates. We're very acutely aware the market intelligence is deep from the point of view of the company understanding. We know where those stages are, but we also know what our brand is, our message is, and what our USPs are, and we know what we're putting out into the industry is a very confident message to say, we can be very, very competitive here in Northern Ireland with the, currently in the market it's challenging, it's always challenging. We can be very competitive, but we will beat you in technical capability, whatever quote you bring to us.
Given the scale of development, I think it was actually mentioned by yourself, Angela, in terms of AI, this is going to be a vastly changing space very rapidly with new skills, new technology, new needs. And I suppose with that comes great opportunity, but also comes risk in terms of 10 years' time. Does Studio Ulster become the dated model and something new and shiny elsewhere essentially dominates the market? How confident are you that essentially Studio Ulster can be future-proofed to ensure that we get a continual return?
Do you want to take the start of that?
I'll take the start of it. We're very grateful for the BRCD funding, but we made the decision at the start that we would keep some of that funding. So there's almost 8 million put aside for future-proofing, for exactly that. So we took that decision at a very early stage that we would recognise that that was an ongoing requirement. Obviously, this is a commercial organisation. There's a lot of R&D within it, but it's a commercial organisation. So as we start to ramp up, what we want to do is obviously start to set aside profits to allow that and reinvestment. But it's just good from our point of view through the BRCD to have that funding to start off with. And we're very conscious, and Declan and the team are very aware of what's happening all the time. We also mentioned very briefly in terms of who helped us build this. So Not Studios, you might want to expand on them. We got the very best in terms of the technology providers. They're probably unique throughout the world, but having that, so at this point in time we're at the top. We've money set aside going forward, and that's part of the strategy.
Yeah, I mean, that's a critical part, to hold back in reserve, the opportunity to upgrade. We know, for example, we are going to need to upgrade in 2 years' time or what we call our GPUs and our processors. So there's a computer uplift in terms of that. That is already costed. We already know what that looks like in our business model. And to Angela's point, we're looking forward to what that technology is. But more critically, a lot of organisations we're seeing in the private sector are where they're trying to make cuts and trying to run fine margins. They're pulling out the research, development, innovation sectors out of all of their industries. And it's almost like a death by a thousand cuts. If you can't look to the future, lift your head and watch the horizon, and in our case, shape and define what that looks like, then you're going to get yourself into the position that you've just articulated a second ago. We have a world-leading research centre that is driving where this industry is going to. We are plugged into the network in this space, the CoStar network right across the UK in this space. We're at the very front edge of developing the solutions for these things. And, in terms of commercial success and all of these things are required to push and keep and make sustainable. But with the level of investment that we've put aside, with the level of research and investment we have to push forward, we're very confident we will stay in a very good position in terms of our commercial attractiveness, but also, as a destination for film and filmmakers. One of the big things about this facility is it transforms the attractiveness of Belfast Harbour Studios and wider Northern Ireland PLC as a location to come and film in. It's not to be taken in isolation also. So we're confident that we have set ourselves up for success, but that Goldilocks zone, that just right zone, we've been working on that for about 5-6 years. That continues. There's no complacency here. This is a disruptive sector.
Sorry,
I was just going to say, you specifically referred to AI, and I think that's something that we deal with in conversations. Whilst we've got a genuinely world-leading set of experts working in Studio Ulster Limited, we're also already deeply plugged into the AI Collaboration Centre at Ulster, for instance. That's that capacity. That's the people who are doing the horizon scanning about where AI and the creative sector is going next.
Yeah, people like Professor Michaela Black, who runs the AICC Centre. She's also a CoStar co-investigator. Yeah. So it's really useful to understand the CoStar team. To Frank's point, are made up of robotics experts and artificial intelligence experts. I mean, one thing I would say, just to add to that, there is real opportunity in the context of Gen AI, and it's not to be mistaken. There's a lot of disruption in the industry. Gen AI is the generative artificial intelligence. It's one sector. So really trying to understand that and creating some leadership and thought leadership in that is a critical operation for most of the sector. I also lead a subgroup of the British Film Institute's board called the Future Production. And that is looking at this sector and the disruption that it might have and could have and it is having in some respects. But also primarily looking at the opportunity. There's a lot of noise about what this is for creatives and how the scary language that comes around. What we need is to start to unpick that and say, well, actually, what does it mean? Where are the opportunities? Because many of our businesses, including our own, are already using artificial intelligence as tools for automation and data cleanup, and businesses that and business and work that would not have been done in this country anyway. They would have been shipped into other lower economy markets.
Last question, because I know we're a bit tight for time. There's a lot of excitement and interest around the creative industry sector. Would speak probably for everyone to say would be fully supported in ensuring that Studio Ulster is front and centre when it comes to reaching out for those FDIs and those visits that are essential to try to bring attention to this place. Probably in thinking about that, we have met with the Deluxe Group in Portadown, hugely successful company that's having renowned success and access to many of these producers that you're trying to attract. We've visited the Game of Thrones studio, again, huge excitement around what that can offer. And I suppose probably, and I read obviously Giants Park, new expansion happening there, and I'm very keen to understand what is the collaboration between you all to ensure that when we have, like, for example, the Deluxe Group were talking to us about having a high-powered delegation from Disney over just a number of months ago. What's the collaboration and the connection among you all to ensure that we get the best bang for our buck? And are we ensuring that we complement one another rather than compete against one another? And finally, on the student numbers and the courses, it's interesting to hear the uplift. That's very exciting. Have you tracked across how many people are staying? I know it's quite early days yet, staying in the industry post degree course to ensure that there is a future in such industries.
Yeah, do you want to take the first question?
Well, no, why don't you go the other way? Yeah, I'll take that.
So absolutely, I mean, our process in place is that the university would use graduate destination processes and so on. So most definitely, because of the demand for the kind of skills that we're talking about, the vast majority of the graduates from these programs do go into careers related to their degree. However, many of them are freelance, they're portfolio careers, because that's just the way the creative industries continue to work, essentially always have worked. But they're incredibly lucrative careers that they work in. We've got examples of very successful startups, for instance, like, maybe 4 graduates from an animation degree formed a company called Aura Digital, who are now kind of leading the way in many of the aspects of first production technology that we're talking about. And I think the piece of work that we're now involved in is ensuring that we can develop case studies, so that we have answers to exactly your question. We can say, well, yeah, here's the numbers, and here are a number of case studies, which absolutely demonstrates the fact that their graduates are going into careers related to their degree, but they're incredibly lucrative careers as well. So that's all work in progress. Yeah.
I mean, coming back to your other question, I was always nervous about talking about commercial clients, but coming back to that idea, Northern Ireland is a sandbox for this stuff, and I think this is really useful for us because it's, in some respects, when you have really good stakeholder engagement, and we believe we do, we try to bring all of our stakeholders with us. We really appreciate the support of government in this. We support the relationships we have with BBC, who are even also aligned through Adam Smith with the locally here, but then nationally and internationally as well. It has to be said, we've also had Tim Davies here for a few hours exploring and understanding this only weeks ago. We have great stakeholder alignment. We also have a research development. I'm in a very unique position in some respects that I sit on both sides of that conversation to drive, to understand what the needs of industry are, to drive it into research and vice versa for research to drive new opportunities for industry. Working with companies such as the companies that you've mentioned is something that we were already doing, and I think this business is also, and I'm talking about the business here, a cross-sectoral business. There are huge opportunities when you're looking at theme parks, amusements. We are working with companies in that space from Los Angeles, Las Vegas, all the way over to the Middle East. And I think there is really exciting opportunities for us as a company to diversify our portfolio. And we're very acutely aware of the work that the Deluxe Group do and the scale and the opportunity that's there. And these are conversations that are ongoing, I would say, is the best I would want to say in this environment. But so building a really good route to the door, building an opportunity that it's open to all, that all understands that this is an opportunity for many, many different sectors. That is something we have to keep and continually work on so that the other sectors understand that this isn't all about film and it isn't all about TV. This is also cross-sectorally. We're seeing other advances from sectors outside the traditional kind of creative technology sector even, who are looking for data and around analysis and gait analysis and movement analysis. That's into sport, that's into security. There's all sorts of opportunities there too. So it is about building awareness. We're grateful for any support we can get in that way, and looking at what the application of this technology can be used for. the sector's converging. The whole industry is converging. We use similar compute levels to a cyber company or a fintech company. Here, the level, and you'll see this as we tour later on, the level of compute that's here, for example, is highly advanced. We also have to take very similar measures to cybersecurity companies. People would not have thought about that 3-4 years ago in this industry, where we're protecting very valuable assets for companies and IP and so on. And so these things become critical to understand other sectors, and that engagement with other sectors is also their understanding what we do. When you look at like the Digital Twin Centre that's launched here, there's an awful lot of overlap there where we can add so much value to digital twins, which are mechanical testing processes ultimately, but the aesthetics and how that plays and that visual representation of all of that, there's expertise in this building that is world class in that regard that can enhance those types of activity as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jonathan. Gary?
Thanks, Chair. Thanks to you all for the comprehensive presentation. As Johnny said, we've had a bit of a focus on the creative industries over this last number of months and seen really the best of what Northern Ireland has to offer. So we thank you for that. And not going to take too long because there's some questions that no doubt we can ask as we do the tour. So mindful of the time. I wanted to focus on one of the things that the Chair mentioned. I suppose is those harder to reach communities. To address regional balance and the challenges that exist there. It's about, I suppose, getting into those communities where sort of deprivation is at the highest. The SURF programme definitely seems to be a fantastic initiative. Could you maybe just talk a bit about the numbers involved in that? Is that an annual, is that programme, I'm assuming there's funding to continue that programme, and I suppose just the numbers involved and maybe the areas that they're going into then, obviously, and complete the programme?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to that, Gary. So SURF is an ongoing programme. It's still very much, it's been running for about 14 months, 16 months. We've worked with upwards of 60 young people, and if you got to imagine that each of these young people needs access to a computer, so it's not as if you can put like hundreds of them in a lab. The whole idea is to have that hands-on access and very close mentoring from the students who are training them as well. So large numbers, and it is region-wide. So I know, for instance, we've got that focus initially on there are 3 centres in Belfast. There's one just quite recently launched, the Fine Centre in Fermanagh. There's one in the northwest in Derry, Londonderry, has recently opened, and actually Future Screens, who again are part of the Studio Ulster family, as it were. We've just appointed what we call a postdoctoral research assistant. There's one in Enniskillen and there's one in Derry, Londonderry. Again, a recent graduate of an Ulster University PhD, and so they're now on the ground in those regions. So rather than it being sort of directed from us in Belfast, it's that sort of hub and spoke thing. We've got people on the ground who are going around and working with some of these. There's so very recent contact was made with Ollie in Gallia, for instance. And just to try and, is there a potential to set up a centre there? Is there an opportunity for co-investment and putting some infrastructure in place there? So very much a work in progress. We've dealt with, as I say, 60 plus young people at the minute. Some of those are already now into that. They were trained and they're now the trainers. So again, we'd really like to expand that capacity. Yes, there's funding in place for another year or so, but again, it's and the other piece, back to the collaboration piece. We work with Professor Alex McDowell from the World Building Institute, based in University of Southern California in the States. Alex McDowell was the guy who had the vision to design Minority Report. When you look at that film Minority Report, you see the future. Alex McDowell designed most of that. So we have him in our Studio Ulster infrastructure. And so he would work with communities all around the world. We would work with him. He would bring some of the learnings so there's this piece called Story Engine. And again, that's another initiative. These are project-based. They're all related, all very, very joined up. But to have that level of expertise come in and work with our people who are then delivering the training as well, bringing that experience. So very much a work in progress, Gary. We'd really love to build more and more capacity. There's the other whole piece around, we've talked about, gender imbalances, but the class piece is almost unique to this region. And that's it. We have that conversation very regularly in our CoStar when we're talking about EDI and so on. People are talking about setting KPIs around gender balance and so on. We're going, well, we need to look at class here. We need to look at that deprivation piece. The rest of the UK looks to us now for leadership in that space. The work we're doing with creative artists with disabilities, for instance, is another really, really huge people. A lot of the young people working in surf, for instance, are neurodivergent. So
one other piece I would add to that, and I think it's critical to understand the opportunities for the workforce here. If we can regularise hours working in a studio-based environment, that enables people to come back and plan their lives. They get good long run-ins, they understand what that looks like. We also can bring people who maybe stepped outside the workforce for family reasons or whatever reason to come back. We can incentivise some of those people to retrain to be able to move here. We don't need to do night shoots for car processes and so on. We can create regular daylight hour working patterns for staff. There's health benefits to that. There's societal benefits to that. There's a raft of ways that in terms of sustainability and workforce and EDI and opportunity, we have an opportunity. This is a relatively nascent sector globally. We are acutely aware that it is, and we want to make sure that we're not adopting the bad habits of some other sectors or the learning. That we get the learning from other sectors so we can build this in and build the opportunity into that. So there's an opportunity here to diversify the workforce, and we have quite a diverse workforce here.
Well, thanks for that, and certainly we'll be able to follow that up with the Department for Communities as well in terms of lending our support for that. A final question, just in terms of your recommendations to the committee, the sort of the route to market stuff. So to me, it seems a fairly simple thing in terms of being included in sort of Invest NI's promotional initiatives. What is the barrier to that being done now? Is it a lack of, I suppose, maybe a lack of awareness? Is it, or is it in terms of, because what you're bringing to the economy clearly is huge. So to me, when I hear the BAFTA's on recently, Belfast been mentioned, the people who have no interest in creative industries were saying it's great to see Belfast been mentioned on the world stage. So why would Invest NI not promote yourselves in those initiatives, or is it, how do we, I suppose, encourage them?
Do you want to take a bit of that?
Yeah, there's probably an element of, without asking them, to be
Yes.
fair directly, that we are under the umbrella of Northern Ireland Screen,
Right.
as opposed to Invest NI. I said that there's quite a few of the clients here would be across both, that sort of technology. But it certainly is one that we would welcome. We know, particularly in the North America, we know Andrea Houghton well, etc. So I think absolutely not. And go back to this issue about collaboration. So it's probably something that we haven't done either because we've been very focused on the Northern Ireland Screen and just getting up and running. But certainly that's support to do that. Getting Invest NI with all their offices in North America promoting, I think would be really helpful.
Also, I think it's not to say that they're not doing this. I think I would go back in that way. I'm certainly aware of colleagues in Invest that are talking about it nationally and internationally, and more increasingly also DBT, for that matter, in terms of the Department for Business and Trade, take a very active interest in what we're doing internationally. So I think that there is opportunity to explore further how that relationship could be matured. And to Angela's point, I think also the convergence piece I talked about earlier on is now creating new opportunities in new markets that very much sit inside their lane also. And I think that opportunity is something that we have had conversations with them in the past that relate to that convergence piece and looking at growth for jobs and incentivising jobs and assured skills training and there's lots of opportunities there for Invest to support what we are doing. And ultimately, it's about, as we mature, as we get to our feet under ourselves here, we get out and exploit all the opportunities that are here hitherto unexploited. And I think that is a really good opportunity for us to think about what that would look like. How would that work? I would go back to Invest and say, well, how would that work? What would that look like for us? Because all of those things are marginal gains at the very, very outset, but they're critical to us as a nascent and new sector and new business.
Thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And finally, Diana.
Thank you. It's been a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to the tour. Very often we hear we're going to be world leading. Companies say we're going to be world leading, but you genuinely are an example of that. And it's something I think is promoting that, how this model has arrived at this point. You mentioned also, Declan, that the Chinese delegation here. And in terms of looking east and then the progress with animation and immersive technology, Do you see them as a major competitor in a sense, or is there collaborative work you can exploit with the Chinese or with Eastern markets?
I mean, there's a lot of the Eastern markets. I would be quite familiar with the Eastern markets and also into the MENA region particularly. And what we see there is, so for example, to take somewhere like Saudi Arabia as an example, they had no industry really until 2018, and that aligns with their 2030 vision, 2017 introduction. It was illegal to make film in that country before then. And so what we see is a population, though, that is 60% of the population is under 35 in Saudi Arabia. And so there's a huge interest in growth opportunities there. But it is very much, ultimately, still indigenous because of cultural norms and because of societal reasons and so on. They are building what they need in their own markets. That is not stuff that's easily brought here to be made, or indeed even would have a market here necessarily. But what we're seeing more increasingly, there are opportunities for people to come and work there, yes. But what they are trying to do is build an indigenous market in those communities. But that's not to say that they don't have smart investors. There are huge levels of investment that are coming right across the UK and Ireland and other parts of projects, for example, that are for international distribution. And more increasingly, as that market matures and those markets in MENA mature, there are really good opportunities for companies here in Northern Ireland to connect into markets for global co-productions, global co-distribution deals, and so on. So we're seeing that right across, and there are indeed Chinese productions too that are working. One of the things that I would say about the Chinese is, and this was made very apparent yesterday, we have a lot of Chinese technology in a building like this. We are still, you could see that in two ways. You could see that as an exposure from the point of view of having to be involved with other countries where we don't have access to the raw materials to make things like the silicate that's required for chips and for LED and so on. In our case, the LED is designed by a British company called Reavey, one of the leading manufacturers in the world, but made in China. And so that's the only option we have. All of that comes nearly from the one region. So there is a requirement to have a relationship if we can continue to use this technology, and that's also an exposure nationally and internationally, ultimately. So there are opportunities there for trade as well. It's not only that there are opportunities for production, there's also the technology manufacturing side for opportunities for collaboration, design, and looking at how that could be brought. Those are businesses that might not necessarily incentivize or fall inside our own schemes to want to bring to this country. But at the same time, we need to fully understand exactly what's happening there and what that looks like for us in terms of the future of the business. So it's international trade. This is an international company. We work and trade globally. We are competing globally. We need to have a global perspective on all of that. So I think it's a very good question, yeah.
And what more can the executive and the department do to give you that ultimate reach, to get more foreign direct investment into Studio Ulster?
We are seeing increasing activity around incentivisation. Incentives come in many different shapes and sizes. Not just.
Can I just ask? Sorry for cutting across you, but is that the same incentives as, say, your competitors in the southeast of England would have, or is that incentives purely from the Northern Ireland?
No, so we would sit into the tax incentives, tax credits, in terms of media credits, film production, large scale film production. They're all normalised right across the UK. But then Northern Ireland Screen can bring a dimensionality to that as well. They have some level of investment that they can bring in terms of additional incentives. And then obviously there's the regional margin that you can build in because, whilst we want to pay our crews in the fairest way possible, it is also still cheaper to rent property here or the facility supply piece is interesting now. There's an all-island dimension to supply, design, manufacturing, for example, that opens up new opportunities for international trading. We need to exploit every avenue. We need to build the margins into a commercial business. We need to understand what that looks like nationally and internationally. The bottom line is companies won't come here to make content if they can do it better, cheaper, faster somewhere else. We have to be highly competitive. So we need to explore almost every avenue there is from our point of view to keep building our competitiveness. And, we're pulling them into our region. One of the big things that, I have discovered in our journey, even in the last 6 months, is how surprised many international companies are about the connectivity that's here.
Yeah.
Not just the data connectivity, but ultimately the travel and how easy it is to travel and bounce across Europe from here, right across the UK from here, and actually getting to America is not very difficult from here, and many locations in America. That somehow hasn't landed with commercial companies. That we see that they are a little bit surprised by that the connectivity. They see us as quite, ruralised, almost to a point, or at least certainly, isolated, but we're not. Actually, in fact, it's easier to come to Belfast than it is many North English cities. And so, in fact, even if you're commuting out of London, they can get here quicker than some Scottish cities. So that message and those types of narrative, incentivising other political governments and their thought processes and their policies in other parts of the world to want to spend money in our country, that's a really useful opportunity as well. What is driving business to come to want, and how do they see us? If their own political institutions are saying you should look at Northern Ireland, that's a very useful thing as well, and that can really very often only be achieved through political intervention.
Excellent. That's really refreshing, because we've talked about air connectivity before, and it's really good to hear from you that point. Just finally, on the Fine Centre in Ennisfield, I am familiar with it. That's my constituency, and it is doing fantastic work. So I'll be down for a visit very shortly.
Oh, brilliant! Yeah, keep in touch.
And just a final quick question from me. If you were to point to one country that has done it well in terms of government supporting the industry and putting it on the world stage and giving it the financial support that it needs, could you point to anyone in particular?
I would probably argue that we're probably up the very front end of that.
Fair enough. Perfect.
Well,
New Zealand. There are pockets. New Zealand would stand out. Canada, I would say.
Canada's very good for production.
But again, going back to your point, the taxation is a UK matter. You'd said earlier, Declan, about in terms of just getting that expansion, virtual production to new areas. So you're always, we always are it is absolutely competitive. So, but equally, while the sectors are very strong and support strong, our offering is very unique. So we're definitely, got a very strong advantage, because it's not always about financials. They need to be there, there's no doubt. But it's the offering is
coming back to your question, if you look at where the kind of hotspots of production activity are, probably answers the question for you in a sense. That right now, that's places like, Canada has always had a very strong productions. They have, but they're in their own way. They have to rethink how they're positioning themselves. America as well, obviously, is repositioning how they view themselves. This is like New Zealand have been incredibly successful. Northern Ireland, for the size and the weight, we punch well above our weight. In terms of what we're capable of doing here. I think that's the capability that's here is world class, and I think that should be remembered. The crew, and indeed even now the team that we've built here at Studio Ulster, are world class, and they stand toe to toe with anybody anywhere in the world. And so we just got to remember that we need to put everything else, Goldilocks zone analogy again, everything else needs to be right, Chair, just to make sure that all of that punches through, because left toe to toe, then we provide some of the very best film sets and film crews in the world.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to the tour this afternoon. Thank you so much indeed.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, Peter.
Recorded any actions, members? Look forward to the tour, and maybe I'll give you some inspiration later on.
Okay. Let's move quickly to item number 7, update from the Department on the Enhanced Economic Zone.
Official.
Chair, just before you, can I just declare that my wife is a member of the Flight Board?
I'm going to refill my coffee.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. You're very welcome. We have Ciaran McGarrity, Director of Economic Policy at the Department, Adrian Grimshaw, Strategic Capital Advisor at SIB, and Brendan McGuigan from Invest Northern Ireland. Gents, you're very welcome, and I'll hand over to you at this stage.
Thank you, Chairman. Again, thank you for the committee giving us this opportunity to give you an update on where we are in the Enhanced Investment Zone. The committee will have on its papers an update from the Department, so I will keep my remarks brief, and I know you're under time pressures. The paper we provided gives an update developments from our initial paper in March. It outlines the work that we have been doing, which has primarily been focused on finalising our Gateway 1 and 2 combined submission. I'm pleased to say that submission is now with HCLG for final consideration, and we expect feedback from that department in June. The combined submission sets out the vision for our growth for our target priority sector of advanced manufacturing. The submission also sets out the barriers that are inhibiting growth in those key areas, and at a high level, some of the potential interventions that EIZ could possibly fund to address those barriers. And again, the committee will have cited those from the paper. Importantly, the submission also made clear that the investment funding will be open to companies across Northern Ireland. On a wider point, I just want to cover a couple of key points that I think are fundamental to the EIZ programme, and importantly help put into context our approach to securing UK government approval to our proposal. First and foremost, as you're aware, this programme is a UK government programme, so our ability to flex the utilisation of this funding is dependent on their agreement. We must assure them that our proposal delivers against their policy objectives, which, as the committee will be aware, is around productivity and key priority sectors which are aligned to the draft UK industrial strategy, and importantly, which support clusteral development, a key component of the UK industrial strategy. Critically, again, as the committee will be aware, this is not additional funding to the block to use to offset pressures in the overall NI or indeed DFE budget. So that's a key point for us moving forward. There are currently 13 investment zones across the UK, the vast majority of which are still in development stage. While the programme itself is a legacy of the previous UK government, it was found a period of detailed consideration last autumn as part of a wider consideration of other funding programmes retained by the new government. The second point I want to make is that while MHLD is the policy department and ultimately the approving UK department of our proposition, a range of Whitehall departments such as DBT, Department of Science, Innovation and Technology, the Office of Investment and critically Treasury are heavily involved in the assessment of the EIZ submission, particularly at Gateway 4. And I reference Treasury specifically because fundamental securing UK government approval for our proposition is a clear demonstration, I will not be surprised this, that the UK government investment of 150 million will leverage, as a minimum, the same again from the private sector and their partners. So absolutely fundamental. That, I know the committee's query on this issue, was a key driver in our rationale to expand the focus of the programme, not replace it, but to expand it to include advanced manufacturing. You'll be aware that advanced manufacturing is our second largest exporting sector, with over 3,500 companies directly employing over 50,000 people. It therefore, I believe, and it presents a great opportunity to leverage that private sector ambition, which is so critically, and importantly, support their ambition of those companies to drive forward their growth potential. The third and final point I want to make, and is very much linked to the point about leveraging private sector investment, is that this programme needs to be driven by the needs of industry. UK government wants to see clear evidence of industry involvement, leadership and, importantly, co-funding. The proposition also needs to demonstrate a clear link between industry and our research base, and how that linkage will address the identified barriers, such as skills. The committee will be aware of the significant challenges that companies are facing. In our target sector of advanced manufacturing, it is estimated that 1,400 new workers are required each year. That brings in UK government focus on cluster development. As per best practice across Europe and further afield, they want to see the triple helix cluster of business, academia and the knowledge base working together. They need to work in partnership to drive sectoral growth and develop that sectoral base rather than just focus on individual company growth. Drawing on advice from the Productivity Institute, we recognise the need to shift the balance of our investment from a focus to that individual grant into the wider innovation ecosystem, and that will drive that sectoral growth. So our universities and our colleges will play a tremendous role in this proposition as we move forward. The emphasis on the need for the involvement of our universities is clearly set out in our Gateway 1 and 2 requirements. So there is a specific question in that submission seeking the endorsement of both universities of what we have proposed. Thankfully, the universities have agreed and are part of advisory panel which will support us in developing the proposition. We are also unfortunate here in Northern Ireland we have a strong track record of industry and university engagement, and you've heard, I'm sure, some of that this morning today about the tremendous work that's going on by Ulster University and NI Screen with Studio Ulster. So we have, along with the university, sector industry representatives and council skills council representatives on our advisory panel, which will help inform the department and guide the department in the development of our EI proposition. I think in conclusion, I just want to say that the Enhanced Investment Zone presents a tremendous opportunity to support our advanced manufacturing base, improve its productivity performance, and in so doing support wider growth across the economy. The committee is aware of the timescales we have set to secure UK government approval. I'm sure you'll agree these are challenging, but I think they are delivering because there is a willingness, as we have found from our evidence gathering from all partners, to work together to support delivery of this.
Thank you, Ciaran, as always, sir. Appreciate the update. What stage did the department decide that they wanted to shift the focus and expand its?
It was pre-Christmas.
Okay.
We had a change in department structures. I took over and look after economic infrastructure.
Yeah.
And the change of government, as you were in the UK, and go through that period of review, I have a counterpart in MHCLG who looks after investment zones on the green industries that's driven this need for leverage in that significant private sector was a driver. Our focus before that had been around decarbonisation. MHCL very clear this is not a decarbonisation programme. We've got DESNES doing that, and some company, and there are various programmes doing. This has got a bit of productivity. And when we looked at the scale of the green industry the size of it, it's just not there to deliver the ambition that we need to do. So in discussion with the Minister then, we widened it, but it does not exclude, so as we're absolutely clear, it does not exclude advanced manufacturing, and this is a bit about flexibility, and where we will need the committee support and others, is to encourage UK government to be as flexible in the interpretation of what we mean, in terms of who gets included in that. So it's probably before Christmas. And UK government are content with that, and if you look at the other EIZs around UK, you will probably see advanced manufacturing, including green industries as well.
And I think it's a sensible move by the department. I don't think the decarbonisation market was big enough to deliver the 150 million, never mind, attract another 150 million pounds. Then, what stage did the department decide there would be no fiscal incentives?
Well, the decision hasn't formally been made as part of Gateway 4.
Yes.
The indication the Minister given again after Christmas, when we looked at the practical application of how you do fiscal legislation, was the first thing. Uptake. Not all EIs, as we were from the UK, take it up. The delay in moving this forward, the impetus moving forward, it was. And then you know yourself and the understanding. You might have 150 million. You make assumption that 40 million will go for fiscal incentives. Well, Treasury might say it's 60 million. Yeah. So you're left. They have the final say. You do not get the control of that. So when you look at, we think 150 million is not a lot. No. So when you look at the needs from our indigenous business here, and I think there's a big challenge on displacement with fiscal incentives. I've seen that in Flintshire and other places, and if you read some of the prospectus, I don't think Wales is too worried about lifting somebody from North England or wherever, encouraging them to relocate. Now, I'm not sure how Treasury feels about it. But so that was the sort of thinking, but we have to present to UK government our rationale as part of Gateway 4 as to why we are not proposing to do that. We don't have to, and other investment zones don't do that. We think there's enough investment to be made in our infrastructure around skills, around the research base, and directly supporting companies with capital infrastructure from equipment, wherever it may be.
And do you have a current thought in terms of the breakdown of that 150 in terms of revenue versus capital?
We are developing our thinking that there, and it will move.
Yeah,
and
with demand.
To be honest here, we want the flex.
Yeah.
I think, again, you'll be more familiar with this, but the external, the macro environment is changing rapidly. Some decisions are being made by companies here, and some constituencies here that will be influenced by what is happening across in America and tariffs, stuff like that there, and that will delay decisions. So I might have a view about, and Brenton from Vest or Adrian might have a view about, we had all the X to Y. But we did a call for evidence.
Yes.
We had £2 billion of ideas came through in those. Now, that's the totality of the project. It clearly isn't affordable. Yeah. 150 million is not, and I made this clear at our evidence, is not going to 3 or 4 projects.
Yes.
The skills base is fundamental. Now, how much do you need for skills? We know from the skills barometer where the challenges are at level 4 and 5. How do we do that? We know the pressures on the education. So, we have been working at a model, but we will have to present that in Gateway 4.
Yes.
So, at this stage, what we have presented the UK government, and which our feedback is they like, is here's the barriers that are stopping Northern Ireland companies in the advanced manufacturing sector grow, and this is the barriers to productivity. Now, the other side of the coin is say, well, so what? What are you going to do about it? And that's where we will be working over the next couple of months with those companies, yes, with our sectoral leads from Harani and Makers Alliance, etc., to try and inform and give us an insight of how we can better support companies.
So this is for indigenous companies and not to attract FDI?
Again, the flexibility, if there was a large FDI, was good. But if you think of advanced manufacturing, Senator Brennan, when was the last large FDI manufacturing company, I think? I was struggling. Yeah. There's been few in the pipeline. Yes. So I think there's enough challenges in our indigenous companies here. They may be foreign owned, but I think that we want companies here to scale. Mm-hmm. And then as it build it and they will come, sort of, we have all those tensions to sort of to address. But we think there's enough demand from companies in who have ideas around, you know, factories of the future, all stuff that you're here now. Amick, I'm sure you visited as well. You know, how do we exploit that technology and the knowledge is coming out of it?
So Invest NI's role is then to support its current clients to take advantage of this?
Yeah, well, I wouldn't take FDI completely off the table, but you know, when FDI companies come in, the number one ask is, can you demonstrate the talent supply that I need to successfully grow a business? That all comes back to skills. Yeah. So if we're focusing on skills, which will be a core focus of this, that serves both the FDI market and the indigenous, but we probably are focus more on the indigenous. You know, we see the challenges they face as they've been quite articulate as to what those are. You know, they can't get the people that they want anymore. So how do we help our companies grow without necessarily growing their headcount? And that all comes back to productivity, which is core back to what the EIZ is there to do.
And Chair, can I just do that point on investing? We know that there are companies in the advanced manufacturing sector who are not investing in class.
Yes.
That will not preclude them. Okay. So I'm clear from securing funding or support from our programme moving forward. They are barriers to. They will face the similar sort of barriers around skills, leadership, investment equipment. We want to create the magnet. We want this to be as flexible as possible. We're demonstrating the UK government it's not just a pot of money for a small number of companies.
And SIB, what's your role?
So I'm just engaged by the Economic Infrastructure Division.
Yes.
I was previously working on the Seating Growth deals and have just segued into supporting Ciaran and the wider team on the enhanced investment.
And will SIB then have a role in terms of 7 projects?
No, not formally. Okay. No. So DFE is the accountable body. Invest and I will be the primary delivery agent. Yeah. And there may be others through the skills, colleges, etc. So sure. No formal. They'll just advisory.
Perfect. Okay. David?
Thanks for coming in. So there's no additional money. There's 150 million over 10 years, so it's 15 million a year. There's no tax benefits to the private sector. It sounds like layer upon layer of UK red tape, to be honest. What incentive is there for the private sector to actually just not get on with doing what they're actually doing?
Well, back to even the process. So the process, again, this is where flex comes in. So if you know the City and Growth Deal programme, it's flat cash. But the demand is not flat. Demand's high. So we have a job of work to do with the EOF. So I would hope that this isn't over 10 years. I would hope that this is over 5 years. Hopefully we'll continue, Treasury will fund over 10 years.
That's 30 million.
No, but sorry, the 150 million is split over 5. But it could be in year 2 or 3. These would all, they'll be picking up where we get more companies involved. I think there's the companies, again, from our call for evidence, there are issues around skills there. I think we can't support them. UK government, again, as City Gates, will pass back accountability for the decision making on projects and not go through the UK government. So it's our job to be flexible, to turn the pace and speed to support those companies. It will be a mix. We want transfer, a number, and for those colleagues who may have been at the call for evidence, we would like, as part of our 150 million, identify a number of transformational projects where the private sector said, see if you give me 40% of the cost or 30%, subject to state aid, we can really do something special here. I mean, double-digit millions. So the additionality is clearly there. Okay. This isn't a trickle down about give a pound, I'm not saying you're suggesting that.
I'm just, off that 15 million per year or 30 million if you do over 5 years, how much of that is taken by the department to run? Or is that only for...
So there's a 6, out of the 150 million, there's a 6 million across all the EIZs, it's about 4% administration charge.
Administration, right, okay. And then just, you said about the universities and colleges and engagement, you said the universities come back, you didn't mention the colleges. So have the colleges come back to engage in this?
The colleges have been involved?
No, have they come back to approve? You said the universities had approved the plan. You didn't say the colleges.
No, so the 2 universities on our research bit, the 2 universities are on our advisory panel, the colleges aren't on it. Okay. But I'm happy to look again at the college in terms of, it's an advisory panel to come in and support us in terms of doing it.
So what role are the colleges then?
Again, depending on the interventions, it could be level 2 or level 3 or level 4. It depends what programme we have.
Right, and do the colleges know?
Yeah.
Are they engaged? What I'm trying to get is that the colleges, it sounds like this is already happening, to be honest. You've seen it in the mega out in Tyrone. We were up in North Regional College in Coleraine, and this is kind of... So I'm trying to add, what is this? If it's already happening, that's...
I suppose it's turbocharging it, and if you go to Megan,
150 million over 10 years.
well, it could be some of it will move forward, but around the skills agenda, there's more. We know there's a clear gap. The colleges will tell you, sure, there's more to be done. There's funding pressures there, but it has to be additional. It has to focus on productivity, not just on other interventions that they're involved in. Do you want to clarify?
Yeah, I mean, if you take the two parts, you take the transformational projects, there's an opportunity for us here to support a number of large projects that Invest and I, as business as usual with our budget, simply couldn't entertain. So there's an opportunity to do something really game-changing for the sector here. In terms of the wider interventions we do and where we come to engaging with the college, it is, as Ciaran said, it's about scaling up. I mean, we talk to Mega very regularly. They have ambitions to grow that, particularly the industry training. They're less focused on qualifications, but how do they upskill the people that are already in their business? They're trying to increase their productivity and increase their without many people. It's automation, it's digitalisation skills, and that's where the colleges come into play in partnering. So it's about scale.
They're already doing that. That's the bit.
But I think industry would challenge quite.
I would then challenge that this isn't doing anything to bring that. I just don't see how this does anything to actually make any difference other than add layers of government bureaucracy to it.
So I think in fairness to the department, this is a UK government scheme who they are required to deliver. This is to be delivered now by December, and you could be proven right once again. But let's maybe give them a...
Well, we'll see in January.
Well, you'll see. We are keenly engaged and understand, but we think that we think there are ideas for projects out there of scale. Yeah, that could be supported through the AIZ.
Take Valley off the list more.
I genuinely do. I think, hopefully, and that's what UK government do not want to say this is more, this is the same. That's very clear.
Okay.
Yeah. So very clear in that.
Can I just sorry, can I come in on the point about the university? So reference was made to that in the opening remarks, but that is dictated really by MHCLG and the format of the questions they ask. So it was very focused.
I was just checking that these colleges were involved. That's all.
Well, they will be, as has been outlined. There's a whole series of thematic workshops to be had over the next 4 months, and that will focus heavily on industry engagement with colleges.
I think all the evidence as well that come from industry, identifying what potential projects could be, running right across a number of those was skills. So that's the voice of industry saying there's a need for skills here. So that's them saying nearly saying very loudly the current provision doesn't meet the needs and gives us an opportunity to explore those.
Thank you. Notwithstanding some of David's points, which I think are valid, I think we have to really just look about how these schemes are cross-cutting across different areas of responsibility. I'm also keen not to knock a gift horse in the mouth as well. Any funding's important and welcome. The 150, I suppose, probably when we're looking at enhanced investment zones, it was started to be something major in the first instance, and David is right, £150 million spread over 10 years. When you take the different areas of responsibility, it won't be transformational in this instance, but if there's the potential down the line to add up on that certainly is a good thing. I suppose probably one of the major selling points for enhanced investment zones was the financial relief. Okay, that was one of the critical aspects that was talked about quite extensively. So I'm interested to know, you've done quite considerable stakeholder engagement surrounding your plans. What were the stakeholders saying in relation to this point?
I think it's fair to say that some would want fiscal incentives and draw a red line in the map. There's no doubt about that. Do that. Others are again focused, well, what's the benefit in terms of how does that address the skills agenda or the equipment agenda or whatever else may be. So it's a mixed view, but we will have to take a view on the overall impact. That consideration is still ongoing, but the line
was there a strong opinion from stakeholders that the financial incentive should be an important component?
No,
there wasn't.
No, but I know that on our call for evidence, some of the projects, and we've been out to visit each of the ports, would have ideas around actually that should.
Because given this smaller funding package overall, I understand how this may not be a route for FDI. Okay, I get that. But then some of these indigenous businesses, and I welcome the extension into advanced manufacturing, I think that's an important step. Many of them would look towards financial incentive as a key component to build their business. We know the financial situation that they're facing at the moment, and I find it hard to believe that we're diverting away from that principle. So who took that decision?
Well, the decision we made formally at Gateway 4, but our indication said earlier was again a minister. We were briefing the minister in terms of the overall impact of it. I think when you look at the UK, it's not all EIZs. I know it might have been touted as a fiscal incentive, so that's the great thing, but it's not delivering what they thought. If you look at what stamp duty, land tax, capital gains tax, national insurance contributions, there is a challenge around additionality. And if you think what those tax incentives are, in terms of national insurance contributions, you may pay for 3 years or 5 years. It's capped as an employer. But if it's not FDI, where are they coming? Where are they coming from?
These enhanced zones right across the UK. Are you aware of any others that are not using financial incentive?
Yeah. So I think when you look across investment zones and free ports across the UK, only 4 have selected the fiscal incentives that are available. I do have a map, and it's in my bag there. I think it's one in Liverpool, Wrexham, Flintshire. I think there might be one in Scotland as well, the 4th, I forget, but I can come back to on that in outline.
Closely, whose model are we closely most aligned to in terms of the other economic zones? I'm keen to see what the patterns are across the board.
So we're not aware of the size of those actual red lines on the maps that those particular deals have drawn. The interventions are available under the EIZ. There's 3 sites limited to 200 hectares. They require the red line drawn around them. We don't know what those red lines look like for the other deals across the UK. What we do know is that the uptake generally is less area than one free port. So that suggests to us that there isn't a wide uptake of those fiscal incentives.
It doesn't benefit all. It's linked to a geographic area.
Would it be fair for us to get, or achievable for us to get a compare and contrast among the different zones to see where Northern Ireland fits in terms of the vision of other areas?
Would that be better at Gateway 4 because you haven't actually made it?
We haven't made it. MHLG have produced, there'll be an action plan coming out as part of the industrial strategy, which will talk about the benefits. I've seen it, the department, MHL has shared it, and a company from MHL will talk about the benefits of free ports and of investment zones, and that shows you a map of where they are. The detail that you're looking, we wouldn't have that detail. But I think it's important that fiscal, it is limited to a red line. So when you talk about, I know companies, so you would be asking a company to say the red line wasn't in your constituency, you'd be asking that company to move from your constituency. I
accept that, but it's about keeping them in Northern Ireland.
100%.
And if it was moving them to a zone where they were going to have increased access to services provision, labour force, and also add value to Northern Ireland GVA, it in a sense would still be a good thing if we take the parochial aspect out of it.
And I think if we strip that back, they still need the access to labour. This won't solve the access to labour. The red line, the taxi, what it will do is make it cheaper for them. But the labour is still an issue, and it's still an issue where they are now. So it's how do we support to keep them in there? Again, in the regional balance agenda and the growth moving forward, how do we grow those? And some companies don't want to move, But
I get that. Perhaps that compare and contrast is later on as the chair's recognized. So thank you very much.
Diana.
Thank you. And just thinking about, I can see the enhanced investment zones where the free ports come in, but can you tell me how that can impact? We're talking about regional balance. The southwest, the Fermanagh South Tyrone constituency I represent, the indigenous industries there. What opportunity is there for them to benefit from the AIZ?
Well, again, when we come at Gateway 4, we'll identify the interventions we're going to use. I made the point at the start that the companies open across Northern Ireland in that advanced manufacturing sector to sort of say, here's the opportunity, whether it's on skills, it could be leadership training, it could be level 4 to level 5, working with South West College. Again, those are the interventions that we'll be working through to do that. I can't tell you now how they've been. What I am encouraging, and what we're trying to do, and we went down the mid-South West region and the South West region to look and sort of encourage what are the challenges those major companies down there are facing and how can we support them. We're continuing to engage, and that's this flex. We wanted to understand, we wanted to call for Evans to understand, tell us what your plans are out there. Other companies didn't share those. Some did. Some companies did, but there are other companies, for commercial in their own sense, didn't. And we can't share that, obviously, doing it. But we continue to work. Some of them would be large clients. I know that energy is a massive issue in your particular region, energy costs. So we're thinking about how we develop an intervention that could support that there in some way, but there's not a decarbonisation. It doesn't replicate another programme. But that's the challenge we have.
That's what I'm hearing. Yeah. Just looking at AMIC in Belfast and Queen's University underwriting that. It's topical. Last week we were talking about funding and Queen's their commitments there to make this questionable now. I mean, how do you react to that? How do you respond to that?
It's disappointing for me because I'm the SRO for the City and Growth Deal programme in DFE, so it's a challenge, and I understand the position the Queens find themselves, and we are working with Queens to see how we can support them. They face, as you know, revenue pressures, and that's an institution they need to make a call moving forward. But I would hope, again, on the alignment piece, I would hope that universities will be central to this, and the colleges will be central, but that there will be an opportunity for AMIC and the investment that is going in there from the public purse and in Queens, that EIZ could develop an intervention that would support, again, on the skills agenda. I come back to the level 5. You're talking about advanced manufacturing, robotics, use of AI, some of the stuff you may have heard from ARV or whatever it may be. I think there's great opportunity there for Queens to support companies. It's a bit about, this isn't just giving money to the university, this is supporting companies to tap into the knowledge that is being invested, that we've invested in through City Growth, or Shared Island, or UKRI interventions. It could be Strength in Places is the best one, I think.
Okay,
thank you. Finally, Gareth.
Thanks, Chair, and thanks, folks. Brief question for me. This appears to be very much a moving feast. So, when it was initially mentioned, I know some of the port. I have declared my wife's a commissioner in Foilport. There was a lot of sort of excitement around particularly free ports, the benefits, and even in terms of, and we'll mention the B word of Brexit, in terms of actually the unique benefits that some of our ports would have, having obviously the access to the UK, but also sort of that gateway into Europe as well. In terms of the feedback from the ports, have you any could you give us any analysis as to what their feedback has been? Certainly from what I hear from all of the ports is there was a sense of disappointment, if you like.
And I deliberately met them all individually, rather than just because this was the decision made.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that.
Appreciate it. So, and I'm sorry, you thought that just so we're clear, 150 million is a combination of free ports money and investment zone money. That's why it's there. So, not unreasonably, I think if you're a port to say, well, why am I not getting a? But the proposition was agreed by the executive and UK government last year when it came out. So, disappointment. But the point, and I know that in your own constituency they have ambitions for moving forward, and we spoke to them about that. There may be other ways, and still ways through the EIZ we could support that. Okay. And that's what we want to look at, those interventions. Others, not too far from here, will have ambitions too for moving forward. I know I spoke to them and they were disappointed as well from that shift across too. But it is that, how do we, that flex, how do we support the port, or it's private, and more importantly, it's tenants perhaps?
Look, Kieran, I appreciate that, and I suppose the important message, and we are going to one of the ports, and as I say, I have an interest in all the ports, for that matter, so in terms of that, but really what you're saying is there will still be opportunities for those ports.
In the advanced, so they will make, and some of them have, some will make a link with tenants on the advanced manufacturing space. It has, we've got to go. So, big thing with UK government is you can't give a pound to everybody, right? We want you to focus, and we want you to make decisions, and we want you to prioritise in line with the UK industrial strategy. Yeah. So we then have to demonstrate in Gateway 4 that here's the opportunities, and we have some large companies here who have great ambitions around the advanced manufacturing. Some in your constituencies who have ambitions about moving forward, where EIZ funding could unlock. Okay. And then what we need to do then is wrap around interventions that support not that company specifically, but the supply chain, the college, the skills agenda, that wrap around that. That's our challenge. Now, where a port fits into that and a partnership with towns, I know some here, that's a matter for them to do. But
Thanks, Chair. Thank you.
Finally, for me, so your update in December said that the project would launch in September. You're now saying that it's going to launch in December. Confident it's going to launch in December?
Well, again, we're going back to the executive. The executive's not meeting in August, so I'm pushing it. So the minister will go back to the executive in September. Again, hopefully with a goodwill, and it is challenging. But we are meeting weekly with colleagues, or Adrian and the team is meeting weekly with colleagues in MHCLG. We think they like what we've said now. The challenge then will be on demonstrating at Gateway 4 the interventions we have, how they are not seen as just more money for Invest NI or more money for a college or more money for picking up, David, your point. So we have to do, and I think that's where the transformational projects come in.
Okay, good. And as David said, see you in January. Thanks. Thanks very much for all your hard work there. I really appreciate it.
So, action, Chairperson, is that
I just understand why we're not doing it.
if the committee's content, we'll write to the department just seeking information on the tax exemptions employed in the EIZs and the rest of the UK, and also when it's available, site of the Ministry for Housing, Local Government, etc. Benefit analysis, comparing the different different approaches to the EIZs across the UK.
Yeah. Okay. Content. Okay. Moving to item 8, then, members. Freight container safety regulations. We discussed this last week, bringing Northern Ireland into line with the rest of the United Kingdom. Members content that we consider the following motion. The Committee for the Economy has considered the statutory bill SR 2590, the Freight Container Safety Convention Regulation, Northern Ireland 2025, and subject to the report of the ESR, has no objection to the route. Is that agreed?
Yeah.
Thank you. Members, last week we discussed the issue of the Product Regulation and Metrology Bill, and thank you to the committee team for putting together the committee's report. Are the members content to approve the report and have it printed as the second report of the mandate?
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you, members.
Great.
Okay.
Yep. Okay. Item 10, members' correspondence. Members content to dispose of those as advised in the index. There's only one that we need to discuss, but we can ask that with Jonathan. It was just about the dates.
Yes, well, I'll get that into
Yeah. Okay. Members content. Okay. Item 11, forward work plan.
So, members, quick one. Bormac, who are a cross-border manufacturing cluster, they're apparently meeting with the Minister on Tuesday, the 20th of May, and on Tuesday next week. They want to meet with members as well, I think. So, members just let me know, do they want to meet with them? It'll be Parliament Buildings, 1 p.m, Tuesday. So that's lunchtime. So if they want to do that, that sounds like yes. Okay, then I'll sort out a room. I'll get them in the room. If members will then confirm to me that they're definitely coming along, we'll sort out something. If that's okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Other thing then is national franchised NFDA. So this is all about emissions. Okay. So the committee decided last week that they'd really like to do that as a joint concurrent with infrastructure. Unfortunately, we're not in Parliament Buildings hardly between now and summer recess, and Mr. Buckley is not available on the dates that we are. So the suggestion here would be that we don't do it as a joint concurrent, and that we do it on the 11th of June when we're at Queen's, if members are willing to do that.
Again, look, don't hold back if you can, just because I know Emma and I are in Brussels with the Windsor Framework Committee, but it is an important piece of engagement. And if it could have been tied up with them, we don't have to be there. I would like to have been, but unfortunately with the committees, I don't want to be.
It's just, I think we could easily do it as a Economy Committee briefing on the 11th of June when we're at Queen's. So the Queen's would talk to us about what they're going to talk about. There's a wee bit about the energy efficiency grant scheme, which the Chair was interested in, and then we could take this piece on the regulation. And it's an interesting crossover with the Windsor Framework Democratic Scrutiny, because they're, I don't think, going to deal with it, but it's an EU reg stuff. So it would be, it's always a pity when the two members aren't present, but it might be particularly a pity on that day. So if the 11th of June goes, then that's okay. I'll not do it as a joint concurrent if the committee are content.
It's in your hands.
Yeah. Okay. Let's go with the one at Queen's then.
Okay. Very good. And members, other thing then is 8th of October, so okay, this is well into after some recess, we're going to go to Collins Aerospace Committee ready to grade in Kilkeel. I'm trying to rope in, if I can, the Northern Ireland Skills Council as well. Hopefully the Public Accounts Committee will have done with skills by then.
September's been.
Yeah, well, so the phrase sticky paws keeps coming into my mind whenever I talk about the Public Accounts Committee and skills, but shocking.
No, skills is before. It's earlier than that.
Yeah, I know, but your memorandum of response will not be considered until September.
September, yeah.
And then you might not discharge the memorandum of response. You don't absolutely have to. So anyway, hopefully I'll get the Northern Ireland Skills Council. Members are happy to do that 8th of October. That's members are content with
Great.
Great.
Any other business? One, sorry, just for me. So I just read yesterday that the Minister has written to executive colleagues seeking further funding for higher education in the June monitoring round for it to be prioritised. I'm keen to, if we can get Mark Lee along, just to ask what that ask is, what that ask is for, and what, if any, feedback has been received from executive colleagues on that.
Should have the department with us next week.
Okay.
Next week we're in the Senate chamber. On that subject. Sorry, forgive me. I forgot to mention that there's the Immigration, Asylum and Borders Bill. The Department of Justice. Okay, sorry. Start the sentence again. The UK government is going to legislate as part of the Asylum, Immigration and Borders Bill. It includes some devolved provisions. It's mostly a justice bill, so it's mostly their problem. But there's clause 53 of said bill refers to some economy matters. Honestly, the department has just written to me about this. What it seems to be is a bit of a dispute between the executive and the UK government about what is devolved and what is not. This is not unheard of. Members, it's really not unheard of. But what they're going to do is going to clarify and say, now this bit's devolved and this bit isn't, and that's what's going to be in the bill. Members are content. We'll take a short briefing on this next week. So it's going to be action-packed next week. We'll take the department first to talk about this. Honestly, well, members make up their own minds. I think it's straightforward. Then we'll take the budget. Then we've got renewable electricity support scheme, and then we've got the joint concurrent with agriculture, all about telecoms and stuff. So it is, apologies, really action-packed. But it's just because that LCM that's coming, and the budget bill is it's going to be the week after next. And I would like you to be prepared for all of those. So if members are content with that. Sorry, I cut across
Chair, just really follows on from the Chair's comments on funding for higher education. Could I propose that we write to Queen's, or we write, to the Department about what is happening with AMIC, with Queen's, the position that Queen's finds itself in and the danger of losing Queen's as an underwriter for AMIC?
I think we've actually done that, but we can write again and seek an update on the position, because if you recall when they came, we did write at the time, and but it can write again if the committee has agreed, Chair.
Yep. Thank you. It's not AMIC, it's Momentum 2.0.
It's what, sorry?
Momentum 2.0.
Is that what we're calling it now? All right, okay. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, content? Go for it.
So we're adjourned, members?
Yeah, I remember.
So